if the key to thriving in business, life, and relationships lies in embracing a timeless philosophy? NASA trains astronauts with Stoicism to stay calm in space. How can cosmic perspective ground us during everyday struggles? Let's dive into another PhD with Woman on It, Hack the Future. My name is Beata Young, and today's PhD, Positivity Hack Delivered, will be by our guest, Benny Voncken. Topic: Philosophy in Action, Building a Life of Resilience and Clarity with Stoicism. Episode 180 starts here. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on women on IT, an inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, and female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to that hustle because empathy is my motto, and empathy is critical to Stoicism. Let's go back to the topic: philosophy in action, building a life of resilience and clarity with Stoicism. In this episode of Positivity Hack Delivered, join us with Benny Voncken, co-founder of Via Stoica and host of the Via Stoica Podcast, as he explores the transformative power of Stoicism. Discover how Stoicism can offer practical tools for building resilience, improving decision-making, and fostering inner peace in the face of adversity. Benny will dive into key Stoic teachings, including the importance of creating a personal philosophy of life, how to apply Stoicism to business and relationships, and why Stoicism is for everyone, not just for men. Whether you're looking for ways to overcome life's obstacles, build a more intentional career, or lead with clarity and calm, this conversation will provide actionable steps to help you thrive. Benny, let's start with the simple question. Where is your Stoic mind joining us from today?
Yeah, and thanks for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for having me all. So I'm from I'm in the Netherlands at the moment. I'm at a friend's house. I'm kind of traveling. I live the kind of the minimalistic digital lifestyle. So I'm in the Netherlands, where it's nice and sunny today. So I'm happy to meet you from here.
Is it Amsterdam you're joining us from, or some other lovely city?
No, it's Breda. I'm from the south, from Maastricht, where the famous European Treaty was signed. But I'm just a little bit more in the north now, where I went to college. So it's my college town, visiting some friends for a while.
Beautiful. You transitioned from teaching to Stoic coaching. What was the moment when you realized this philosophy isn't just ancient text, it's a lifeline?
Yeah, for me, that transition went rather smoothly and natural, because in teaching, there's a lot of aspects of coaching as well, where you work with your students. It's not just about sharing your knowledge, but it's also about learning how they assume that knowledge, and also making sure that they're in a certain comfortable state to be able to learn. So that transition went natural, but the philosophy aspect went from my personal journey, as I was dealing with divorce, I was dealing with my struggles with alcohol, and also some physical injuries. And I was looking for a guide, when people are in these moments of life where you're just struggling and you see the obstacles, you need some extra help. And for me, I was reading a lot at that time, and I diagnosed myself with an existential crisis. And from there, I started reading some books on that. And that's where I found the Stoics again. I read about them like a long time ago, but now I encountered them from a different mind and a different perspective. And they really spoke to me. And not just that, they showed me a version of me that I've kind of hidden for a while. So as I started reading more about them, I started seeing that this philosophy was truly me, and that I could apply it to life. And I started exploring all the practical opportunities, how it helped me in my work, in my business, and my personal life, of course. And from there, I realized, after practicing, reading a lot about it, I realized that I also had the opportunity to help other people use this philosophy. And again, I'm not here to turn people into Stoics per se, but I would love to inspire people to create a philosophy of life for themselves, because I think that that's really important to for any walks of life, and especially when we're talking here about business, to make sure that you make the right choices that align with who you are as a person. And philosophy of life is crucial. And for me, that's Stoicism, and there's so many more out there. And I've met so many women on my journey who really align with Stoicism as well, which is great, because at the beginning I thought it was something more for men, but more and more we speak online and we share these thoughts. More women show up like, this is something that really speaks to me. And that's where I made that connection between the philosophy for myself as I applied it, the teaching, and wanting to help as many people. So it kind of came together natural, and I've been enjoying the journey so far a lot. I've been learning more and more. The more I share, the more I speak with people, and the more I can help us. That's just a great addition to something that has really helped me improve my life so much more.
Benny, you've said Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about mastering them. What's the biggest myth about Stoicism you want to dismantle, and how does it actually help people thrive?
That's pretty much the biggest myth there is, right? About Stoicism being that's faced wall, that doesn't let out any emotions, that suppresses all the emotions. While it really is getting into connection with who you are and understanding your emotions, and making sure that you have a deep comprehension of who you are. And one of the biggest aspects of Stoicism, besides they say virtue is the only good, so that means that you have to be morally right and make the best choices, but it's also to be in line with nature and to make sure that you're living in accordance with your personal nature, but also with everything around you. And that's one of the biggest myths that's around there. And on the other hand, it's also shown as this masculinity. The masculinity sphere kind of took over and said, like, no, Stoicism is to be a real man, right? To be angry, to face everything, just head first and butt through everything. But it really is about peace, right? It's really about calm, and it's finding that sweet spot of life. They call eudaimonia. That's the perfect spirit state, right? Where you're just at peace with everything, and you can feel your emotions, but you don't act out of them, right? You understand where they're coming from. And the great thing about doing that is once you understand your emotions better, your triggers, where they're coming from, you can also reduce your emotions. You can reduce that output that they have, that trigger, right? That impulse that you can feel, because you can see better what they are. You can take a step back, you come to observe where they're coming from, what they mean to you, the judgments that you place on the world around you. And from there, you can then act from a far better and more neutral stance than from that emotion. So if something happens to you, instead of getting angry and acting out in it, first you can take a pause and think, what was it that really happened to me? Does it really warrant me to react in the way that I did? Or should I do something different? So that deep understanding of our emotions, and understanding that they're also part of us, but also seeing that our thoughts and our value judgments create those emotions on those impulses. So taking those steps will help us to really identify what triggers us, and then help us deal with it in a better way, which is, ironically, it'll kind of have the same outward look as someone who's suppressing their emotions, but we will have a more inward peaceful look, which also radiates to the people around us. So that's why it is really important to not suppress your emotions, but to learn to understand them. And that's the deep knowledge of who we are is foundational on a philosophy like Stoicism.
You transitioned from teaching to Stoic coaching. What was the moment when you realized this philosophy isn't just ancient text, it's a lifeline?
That's a great question. And for me, those kind of work together. As a teacher, it is really important not to just share your knowledge, but to get to know your students, to ask them questions, to make sure that they have the right foundation to assimilate the knowledge, and also to put them at ease, to make sure that they are in the best perfect environment to do so. So part of that teaching is already kind of coaching, so that really intertwined together. And the philosophy part was something on my personal journey as I was dealing with a divorce, struggles with alcohol, but also physical injuries. I needed a guide, some support. And this is something that I've seen throughout my journey. A lot of people, they come to these moments of difficulties where they need some extra help. And for me, that was philosophy and Stoicism in particular. And I'm not here to turn people into Stoics. I'm here to help people find their own philosophy of life, or at least to inspire people to go look for it. And when I was going through all these kind of life crises, if you will, I was reading a lot, and I diagnosed myself with an existential crisis. And that's where I found a book, Introduction to Existentialism. And that also had the Stoics in it. It was comparing a lot of different philosophies. And as I was reading the Stoics, it really felt like I was coming home, right? Something that really hit home to me. And I felt like I was reading about myself. And more I went into it. I started reading all the ancient texts from Marcus Aurelius to Seneca to Epictetus. And I saw the practical value in it. I really saw how to apply this thing, this wisdom, not just to myself, but also to the world around me. And it helped me, especially now, after years of practicing it, it helped me to reduce my anxiety levels. It created a far more positive outlook on life. And that's something that I want to share. So that's where first my basics and my experience as a teacher, then as a coach, and then combining that with Stoic philosophy really helped me to help other people. And that's the best part of this journey, right? We undergo it for ourselves. We try to improve ourselves. And as we do so, we can then share it to other people around us. And I think that that's part of our duty as well, to make sure that we don't only live better ourselves, but the people around us do as well.
Well, Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, wrote his famous meditations as a personal journal during wartime. So, how do your darkest moments shape your mission?
I love that analogy of that reference, right, to Marcus Aurelius. And the Meditations are such a great book. The personal journey of an emperor who was going through some really difficult times, not just wartime, but also a plague and struggles back home in Rome. But for me, and there's some analogies, right? We all have struggles. We all have difficulties in life. They're different, right? Marcus Aurelius was the emperor, is going through a war, but we all have our own struggles, and we shouldn't belittle them and think that someone else is going through some more, or we're going through something more than something bigger than other people. But these are moments that teach us, right? These are moments of growth. And there's a great quote by Seneca that always reminds me, and when I'm in difficult moments, he said, "You're unfortunate because you have never been unfortunate. You have never had the opportunity to show yourself and the world what you're capable of." And as we go through these Stoic practices, as we go through like the reminders of the memento mori, remember we will die, the negative visualizations, all these kind of practices, at one point you start to welcome these adversities, because these are the moments that test you. These are the moments that really give you the opportunity to see if you've been studying well, if you've been doing the exercises, and then you can feel and see where you stand. So at one point you can change your mindset when you face difficulties. You can welcome them and say, this is my training ground. This is my exam. This is my classroom. This is where I put everything together that I've practiced. And you can see how far you still have to go. And one reminder with that is that we don't have to be perfect, right? We will make mistakes and we will get it wrong. But it is important to keep making progress and to keep reevaluating and reflecting, because then we can change those adversities into a powerful tool to help us grow.
Well, it reminds me, why we are sitting here today, because Positivity Hack Delivered were developed during first lockdown. So when we talk about Marcus Aurelius, who wrote parts during the Anton Plague, which killed 5 million, that's really resonates so deeply. And now we are facing a crisis because the stock went down. So the Stoicism is sometimes coined as cognitive behavioral therapy before CBT existed. When modern life bombards us with 24/7 news and deadlines, what's your ancient antidote to stress that even a frazzled parent or CEO or logistic department specialist can use in 5 minutes?
Yeah, no, that's well summed up, right? So a lot of these ancient texts, they feel ancient, but they also are very modern, right? They're dealing with the things that we're dealing with right now. And the main focus on when we start doing this, when we start practicing Stoicism, is to remind ourselves that events happen, right? As you said, now the stock market is crashing. We had a pandemic, but even things in our lives and surround us, even when people fall away, when they pass away, these are events that happen, and they aren't inherently good or bad. It's our label, our judgment that places whether it's good or bad on it, and how we react. So the first thing we need to do when something happens, as you said, maybe in business, or maybe you lose your job or you get a job or something like that, we have to remind ourselves what it is that is happening, right? It's an external event that is happening to us. And we place then an internal judgment because we have certain filters, we have certain wants, desires, aversions. And based on that, these external events are then good or bad in our opinion, in our judgment. So we have a couple of steps to take here. We need to first make sure that we are seeing the truth, what's happening. Let's say I lost my job, right? Don't place a judgment on that already. Just say I've lost a job or I've gained a job, right? You also could have a good thing happening. It's not just a bad thing, right? But we need to be careful with adding those labels, whether it's good or bad. I can also have personal experiences where I had a job and then later I got a different offer that would have been better, or you lost a job, you didn't get a job, and then later you get something better. So it's difficult to really place that judgment quick. So first, see what the facts are, right? See what's really happening. And then look at your judgment. See why do you think that this is a good or a bad thing, right? And if they match, if you see that, okay, this is a good job that I've got because of it aligns with my values, then you can say, okay, this is an impression that I, agree with. This is fine. Let me see what now my moral action is. What is my action that I need to take? Right. One simpler example is if someone speaks to me in an elevated voice and he's talking to me with a frown face and pointing at me, my first impression would be that this person is angry. But I'm not sure. Let me ask, are you angry with me? Let's see if that's the truth. Okay, this person is angry with me. In fact, that doesn't really do anything to me. This person has a judgment on me that I don't know how it influenced. So then I can start to evaluate that. Right? If I can then see why this person is angry at me, maybe it was because of my wrongdoing, I made a mistake, then I can readjust that, right? I can be just, one of the 4 virtues, to that person and make it well. If not, then I can, then it shouldn't affect me. So that's one of the things that we need to be mindful of when we look at these obstacles and these things that happen to us. First, let's analyze the facts. Then let's see what it really affects me. Where does my judgment come from? And then see what kind of action I need to take. And then, as you said, Stoicism is the foundation of modern day cognitive behavioral therapy. And what we're doing here is we're creating some cognitive distancing between us and the event, because we're taking that pause. We're not just reacting instantly to what's happening, but we're taking a step back, we're evaluating the situation. And by doing so, we already take that initial impulse of emotion, of trigger out of it, because we are looking at it from more objective eyes. And that will always help us make better decisions. So taking that step back is crucial when we are dealing with impressions or events happening to us that we deem negative or maybe even positive, and start looking at them more neutral.
Robert Greene talked about Stoicism and compared it to the fighting of 2 boxers. You don't leave the stage, you just prepare yourself for this boxing match. And Stoicism, therefore, is often seen as a masculine philosophy. The American Psychological Association famously stated that Stoicism constitutes toxic masculinity. How do you make it accessible and empowering for everyone, especially for women who are working in technology?
That's such an important topic to bring up. And I kind of compare Stoicism to a more Western and pragmatic version of Buddhism. The main goal of Stoicism is to reach a eudaimonic state. That means the good spirit state, which is in line with nature, which is in line with virtue, and which is its calm and peace. Now, the analogy of a boxer, but you can use an analogy of a tennis player or whatever sport, when you go into the ring of life, the Stoics ask you to show up as your best version, to do your best and forget about the outcomes, right? yes, in the masculinity sphere, people like to use boxing as an analogy because it makes them look strong and feel strong, but it isn't about strength physically. It's about mental resilience, mental adaptability. And especially if we are working in a high stress environment that can be in IT and business, we need to have that adaptability, right? We need to look, as we talked before, about the impressions. We need to make sure that everything aligns with our priorities and values. And once we do so, we can see that whatever happens around us shouldn't affect us, our inner peace, right? So then we talk about the dichotomy of control with Stoicism. It's one of the key concepts to see what's in my control and what isn't, what's up to me and what isn't up to me. And that's where we can find, make those steps with the pressures and the stresses around us. But at the end of the day, Stoicism is really a philosophy about love, about empathy, about gratitude, about making everything come together. So that's why when I hear those analogies about boxing and making it into something angry, right? It always hits home, and it always, it just doesn't feel right. And that's why I love to come on these shows and to set the record straight, because it's all about caring for others, caring for yourself, and caring about others. And there is one of the Stoic philosophers, Hierocles. He had these concentric circles that start with the self and that work outwardly from your family to your neighborhood to the extent of the cosmos at large, right? So we're all connected, and that's one of those things where you see the masculinity and toxicity sphere take over, and they kind of home in on some of the messages, but they really miss the biggest and the most important picture of Stoicism, and that's doing the real inner work and showing the gratitude of the moment where you are, having that self-care and self-love and the love for others. And then you won't need to have those analogies as a boxer. You will just go through life and embrace everything that comes your way. So this is a very important point to stipulate and to show that Stoicism isn't about anger, isn't about being a brick wall. It's about really embracing everyone and making sure that you live the life that you're supposed to live and give that to the world around you to make everything more positive and better.
Talking about setting the record straight, have you heard about Aspasia?
Yes, I have, but you have to. I have heard the name, but you have to refresh myself there a little bit.
Well, she ran a groundbreaking academy influencing Socrates and Plato, yet her legacy was minimized. Aspasia's salon was so influential that Plato's Menexenus hints that she ghost-wrote Pericles' speeches. Even Didymus Calcenturus, an ancient scholar, acknowledged her genius, but called her exceptional, as if women couldn't shape philosophy. How do we rewrite these narratives to honor wisdom, not just gender?
And this is one of the biggest things that the Stoics talk about, right? This philosophy is for everyone, even if you take it one step back to the Cynics. And I do remember Aspasia now when you mentioned it. I've been reading so many books, and I think in a book on Beyond Stoicism, you can read a lot about her stories. But this is the misconception that philosophy is just for men. But you read people like Hierocles that I mentioned, but even Musonius Rufus, and Antisthenes, the founder of the Cynics, which was the precursor of where Stoicism came from, he said that virtue, right? Virtue is the only good. That's what we need to live a good life. Can be learned by anyone, whether you're male or female. That doesn't make a difference, right? We can all talk about life, right? We can all investigate who we are and live better. And that's one of those key messages that I also want to share. And during my journey, when talking online, talking to many people, I've come across so many women who find value in this philosophy when it's explained in the right way, right? When we're talking about the capital S Stoicism, which is the true philosophy that we're talking about, versus the lowercase s Stoicism, which is in that masculinity sphere. But once we really go into the nitty gritty of the philosophy, this is something for everyone, right? This is beyond gender gap. This is beyond whatever you're doing, your work, your status in life. It's blind to that. It's something that we all need. And that's why I really am an advocate for people to find their philosophy of life and to make sure that they then apply that to their life. That's what really makes the big difference. And that's the duty that we all have, right? To make ourselves flourish, right? Virtue it comes from arete, which means excellence or flourishing. And that's where we want to be. And that we can all do that, right? That's our human duty, because we have reason and logic, and we should learn to apply that as well. So yeah, another great topic to talk about, that this is something for everyone.
Well, let's pay justice to another great figure, Portia Catonis. Cato's daughter was celebrated for her courage. So there is another figure that is not so much celebrated, but as always, we want everybody to succeed, and by raising the awareness of female voices in ancient Greece, ancient Rome, ancient history, we can bring a more holistic approach. You coach people on building a personal philosophy. What's one daily Stoic practice that can transform chaos into clarity in under 5 minutes?
Reflection would be one of the best ways, right? And you can do that in many different ways. You can either journal. One of the things that the Stoics would ask of themselves before they would go to bed is to write down, for example, 3 things that didn't go well, 1 thing that did go well, and 1 thing that you want to make progress for the next day, right? Because they also realize that the next day isn't given, but we've had today. So let's look at what we've done right, and also share some gratitude for what we have right now, but to really reflect on what we've done, how we've lived a life, and where we want to grow to, right? That's all that's we're being asked of to make that progress. So we need to learn to evaluate, to assess where we are, right? To make sure that where we are going is aligned with our nature and with virtue. And then as we make those steps, we then in the moment, because that's one of the other key points of Stoicism, we only have the moment, right? The past is gone and the future is unknown. And then in the moment, we can have that knowledge that we're gaining about who we are, help us make the best decisions. But to do so, we need to reflect, right? So journaling is one way. We talk about meditation is another way. But journaling and meditation can be done in so many different ways. So I urge people to find, and this is what we do with coaching as well, to find their own techniques that work best for them, right? This isn't a one size fits all. It's like when you're talking about diet, where you say, oh, you have got to do fasting or keto. Okay, I will try it, but then I will tweak it, right? I will make it my own. For example, I do my journaling consists of writing every morning, and every evening I write something that kind of turned into poetry. And I use like a nice little image to add to it. But these are my thoughts, and I like to use the creative writing aspect of it to put them into something that stimulates me, but also helps other people. So I share them online. But those are different ways of doing it. But it's about reflection, and it's about looking back at where you came from, but also where you are, and that kind of journey where you're heading towards, where you want to go towards. So for me, that's one of the key practices, to really look into who you are and to explore exactly where you are right now.
Seneca wrote letters on gratitude while exiled. So that's another good practice apart from reflection. Benny, Stoics like Seneca were amongst the wealthiest men in Rome, yet he wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." How can we use Stoicism to redefine wealth in a world obsessed with endless growth and find true financial peace?
And I love bringing up Seneca, right? Seneca is a controversial person among the Stoics, where he was, as you said, one of the most influential and wealthiest people, right? He was the advisor to Seneca in his time. And then there's a lot of talk about whether he actually lived the philosophy or whether he's more like a sophist to talk about it in a nice way. But he did understand that he experienced wealth, right? And even we can see Marcus Aurelius. He said, as the emperor, he said, even in a castle, right? Even in a palace, you can live well. So even with that wealth, and maybe that's even more difficult to live well, right? During my travels, I went to countries where people were poorer, and you can see them being grateful for everything they had. And that's one of those practices that we can use, right? We can understand what we have right now is on loan. So even if you have wealth, or even if you want to work for success, right? That's not a given. So we've got to make sure that first we come to terms that what we have right now is all that we need to live a good life, right? We can have more, we can want more, but that's not what we have. So that's one of the first things. And the second part is that everything we have right now can also be lost, right? We can have a great car, we can have a great family, but we can lose that in an instant. So that's not a sense of like, oh, now I'm going to be fearful. No, now I want to be grateful for having them here and making sure that I spend all the time that I have with those loved ones, or at least use the things that I have, like a car, like a house, for the purpose that they were built of, not to show off, right? Not to show other people how well I'm doing according to societal standards. And then what one point that you mentioned is that craving, right? In that quote by Seneca, that's really what gets us, right? Because we have wrong definitions of what success is. Success is wanting more, right? We live in a capitalistic world where you always have to grow. You always have to accumulate more possessions. You always have to chase some other dream. But that doesn't make us, grateful for what we have right here. That always moves that goalpost a little bit further. So when we get something, the next thing is already there. And what that does is to create anxiety, to create this feeling of I'm not good enough. I don't have the things that I have, especially when we start comparing ourselves to others. So that's one of those real techniques. We have to define, things like success, things like riches, wealth. We have to define them for ourselves. What does that mean? I've asked myself, what does success mean? Is it a fancy title, or is it doing something positive and constructive to the world, or maybe just to my family, right? Again, we talk about the rat race, or getting out of that 9 to 5 that a lot of people do, but there's nothing wrong with that if that really aligns with your priorities and values. If people say the 9 to 5 works perfect for me because then I can spend time with my family, I can do all these things that I really enjoy, great. And maybe it's that career building. Maybe you say, I need to contribute this something to the world, but I'm going to work for it because I feel this passion, I feel this drive inside of me, I've got something to offer and I really want to do it. Then great, do it. But it needs to come from the right reasons. And we need to be able to define what that means to us, success and wealth. And only then can we live well, because if you're always chasing to something, and that's what that quote really means, if you're always chasing something more, then you're never going to be wealthy, right? You're always going to be poor. But if you are satisfied and if you're grateful with everything that you have right now, you're going to be the richest person alive because you don't need any more. But you can still work towards more. You can still work towards what you feel like you should be doing, but it should start with a sense of gratitude from where you are right now.
Well, Stoic warned that unmet expectations breed suffering. But in a world of Instagram perfection and hustle culture, how do we set boundaries without becoming too apathetic or, just stagnant? Is radical acceptance the key to joy?
I think it is at least a start, but it is a really good point, right? That radical acceptance. When we talk about Instagram, right, or the social media world that we live in, and we want to chase those likes, we want to chase, we want to have our posts go viral. But when we start, again, from what we believe in and what our core principles and values are and the virtues, right, then we can make sure that our message is the one that we want to send out. And whether that's seen by one person or whether it's seen by 10,000 people, shouldn't really make a difference, right? Obviously, we want to grow our business, we want to grow our outreach, but if we have to compromise our values and who we are for that, at one point we're going to find ourselves in a place where we don't want to be. We're going to be burnt out, and we're going to build something that is not really where we want it to go, right? And it can take charge of us, right? We become the slave of the product that we are creating. But if we keep it close to home, if we follow what we are supposed to be saying, if we know that our message resonates with who we are, and if we have identified all those values, then we can build something for the long run, right? Yes, we have techniques to show up on Instagram or on the social medias, and we can do that. But if we place whether we do something which is good or bad to the amount of likes that we get, again, we are putting our self-worth and we're putting our happiness and our contentment on in the power of others, right? In those externals. But if we show up every day and we do the things that we're supposed to do and what we believe in, even if we don't get the exposure that we like, we can still look back and say, hey, I've done my best here. Yes, I need to tweak something. Yes, I can make some changes, but I've showed up and I've did my best. And that's where we've got to work from. And then that radical acceptance, as you mentioned, comes into play. And we say, okay, I've done my best. This is what it is right now. Let me see where I can where I can grow, where I can make progress. And maybe my message needs to be tweaked, maybe not towards the audience, but for me, right? Maybe I need to change it here and there. And then we can make that true progress. And again, maybe this is one other thing, we have to be adaptable, right? The world changes around us, algorithms change, or the clients want something different. The problem is solved in a different way. If we can change with it, if we can be adaptable in that sense, then we can move along with where the world takes us, and we can make our image, our product, our brand even stronger in that sense, because we are moving along with it and we're changing. We're not staying stuck where we are right now.
The Stoic dichotomy of control inspired Alcoholics Anonymous Serenity Prayer. You mentioned you suffered from alcohol addiction. So I'm wondering, how can you teach clients to dance between ambition and surrender? How can you apply that dichotomy of control in somebody who is suffering addiction from alcohol, cigarettes, or whatever addiction they are suffering from?
Yeah, and that's a great connection to make, right? As you mentioned, I've struggled with alcohol as well, and I've been sober for almost 5 years. And a lot of it comes with, for me personally, with the opinions of others, but also to maybe suppress some emotions or some inner struggles that you have. So that's where you want to start first, right? You want to do that real work inside to find that peace and calm, and also the confidence to know that you are the person that you're supposed to be. And then you can work on those other aspects, right? Where you can say, okay, all those externals that are happening to me, because that's what the dichotomy of control is, right? It's about what is up to me. And you can start, if you read Epictetus, the first discourse and the first part of the handbook, which is definitely something I recommend. It talks about this, right? It's pivotal about what is up to me. And the only thing that are up to me are my judgment, my actions, my opinions, right? Everything that I create. That's why we talked about the impressions earlier as well. Those are the things that are up to me. The rest of it isn't, right? Anything else, the opinions of others aren't up to me. So when I was, going through that process of removing alcohol from my life, I had to stop thinking about what other people were thinking about me, but I had to start thinking about what I was thinking about me, how I was viewing myself as an individual, and where I wanted to go. And that's the same thing when we are dealing with the pressures of other parts as well within business. And again, we see it a lot, right? The people that I work with, they feel that pressure that they have to chase the money, they have to have flashy cars. And you can see this especially with men. But they have that urge to show up for a world that is outside. Well, if you really go inside and you ask yourself, what do I need in life? Again, we talk about those definitions. What do I really need that will make my life feel valuable, or that make my life feel good and happy? And it's so much closer to home, and it's so much more achievable than people think, right? We probably already have it. And I think that that's something that we need to keep in mind, that we are far closer, and we pretty much already have everything that we need, right? So that dichotomy of control is really making that boundary split between what's up to me and what isn't, right? They say even my body isn't up to me, right? I can go to the gym, I can live healthy, I can take vitamins, whatever, but I can still fall ill or be injured or whatever. And I experienced that myself as well, as I was doing sports, and suddenly I had a massive knee injury. And now I have to change and adapt my life towards it. But that doesn't mean that I can't live well, right? That doesn't mean that I can't be the best version of myself. And that's really what it's about, to understand I still have that choice to show up as me, to make sure that my actions are aligned with who I am, and that I don't judge too fast, and that my judgments are based on the truth and not just some random facts that I get from the world around me.
You've lived abroad for 15 years. How did Stoicism help you navigate cultural displacement and find home away from home?
Yeah, that's something that I've worked with a lot. And first of all, I think traveling is such a wonderful form of gaining knowledge and understanding. And we see a lot of divide happening in the world. And one way to really quench that is to understand other people, to gain the knowledge, right? To learn about what makes people tick. And one of the things that I've seen in my travels is that most people, pretty much everyone, wants the same thing, right? They want to have a safe, peaceful life for themselves and for the people around them. And obviously there are cultural differences, and that really enriches life to a great extent. But to really find home, and I've struggled with this, and one of the best quotes by Seneca that I like about this is, he says, you wonder why your travels do you no good, why you're saddled with the very thing that you're trying to get away from, right? You are traveling with your own baggage, your own stuff that you are struggling through. And some people think that by escaping to some other places, for example, if you are in a high stressful job, or you're working many hours for that 1 week of a holiday, why do you think that you're not going to feel happy there? Because you are dealing with everything else that you're bringing along. So that's something, again, we got to work for first. It's not that external escape that we're looking for to make us happy. No, we've got to go internal and make sure that we are at peace here, know that we're doing the right thing, even from Monday to Friday, to really enjoy the weekend, not just the weekend, but also to enjoy the other days, right? Because we don't want to spend 5 days to throw them away to just live for the weekend. We need to make sure that everything is aligned with ourselves. And that's when, I lived abroad in Spain and in Dubai as a teacher, and then as a coach. I'm now kind of traveling around. And I've noticed in myself when asking those questions, like, why do I want to travel? I like to explore. Again, I like to learn new cultures. I like to speak with people. I like to and develop myself as a human being, as a world citizen. And that's one of the things that the Stoics talk about as well, to be that world citizen instead of being stuck in one little space, because the world belongs to all of us. And I just really hope that we get to a place where that's something, seen by more people, where we can share that, the things that we have, and make sure that everybody has at least the basic values and needs met, and then rise and make sure that make sure that the tide rises all boats. But that's something that I've learned from traveling, is you can understand people so much better, and you will stop judging them too quickly, again, putting the label on them of being bad and good, but just human beings like ourselves, like everybody else.
We have so much, traveling now infused. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, was a shipwrecked merchant who rebuilt his life in Athens. So what's your shipwreck moment, and how did it anchor you? Or maybe it didn't anchor you. You're still traveling, and you still want to be abroad and visit new worlds.
Oh, I'm definitely going to keep traveling, but I think the anchoring is more, again, that internal work. And for me, that was when I started going through the divorce, when, in those moments you see your future kind of collapse and everything becomes uncertain and you don't know where it's going to go, and you feel like you're adrift, right? With that boat analogy is nice. You feel like you're adrift. And Seneca said at one point, if you're a sailor, if you don't know where your port is, then no winds are favorable, because you don't know which way you're going. And that's where philosophy came into my life, to show me that if I can travel, right? Traveling doesn't mean that I'm lost or away from home, but I can have that home with me. And now the last couple of years, I've been a pet sitter and house sitter in many different countries, and I'm able to make it my own real quickly by having my established routines, but also knowing that I'm doing something that isn't innately me, right? And that's, again, that's place where we need to be. That yes, Zeno was shipwrecked, but that's where he really found himself. And then again, it doesn't matter where you are location wise, but you can bring yourself with you everywhere you want, as you're following your passions, as you're living according to your nature, and having your priorities and values straight. Then you can find that true sense of who you are, and follow the winds where they take you are always going to be profitable.
Well, since we are talking about ships, here is another quotation by Grace Hopper. Ships in a harbor is safe, but what is a ship? Well, that's not what ships are built for. So we are talking about Stoicism, and we are reaching towards the end of our show. We will be joining Jamil shortly. But let me ask you about your Via Stoica podcast. What's a story from a listener that made you think that's why Stoicism matters in modern world?
And the great thing about the podcast, we've had so many, wonderful people on to, who write books and everything. But we've also had some really powerful women on the podcast, and these last couple of episodes, I really encourage people to listen to it, because, again, we talked about a little bit, philosophy is usually seen as a domain for men, right? But in the Stoic community, we see so many powerful women voices show up. And I've on International Women's Day, I posted about a few of them out there. We have Casey Pierce, we have Alexandra Kuntz, and we have Casey Brittany Palat, and we've got a couple more lined up. And what they really showed me is the multifaceted way to apply this philosophy, right? And obviously, I don't know what it's like to be a mother, but they shared how their philosophy helped them in those moments of change in their lives, right? But also as a parent and also as a female entrepreneur, how they could then navigate those waters better. So we've had so many great people on the show, and just speaking to them. And that's one of the, the honors and privileges that I have. And I think it's great to have a podcast to be able to speak to those minds who are willing to share. And they're doing some great work as well with different platforms, with books, but also with, for example, Brittany Palat has Stoic Care, and they're working together now as well to create some workshops. And that's just really powerful to see that different viewpoint towards a philosophy that really opened my mind, and which I love. Right, I work with Brendan and Bryce, my partners with Via Stoica, but they're also men. But then having the being able to interact with a completely different view, and at the end of the day, we're all humans, so it isn't that different, but still, it's a different perspective on the philosophy that really helped me appreciate it so much more. And that's why we are really trying to help get more women on the show, because we want to make it such a diverse space. And that's something that the philosophy really needs as well, as you mentioned before, for it being kind of stuck in that toxic masculinity space. And it's too precious and it's too wonderful to keep it there.
More diverse thought brought to this philosophy is definitely beneficial. Stoics talk about memento mori, remember about death, which is another philosophy from Middle Ages. Steve Jobs famously said, "Death is life's greatest invention." How do you turn this stark truth into fuel for living boldly?
I think it's, the Stoics say death isn't a bad thing, because how can something that is so natural, that happens everywhere, right? Death is change. We can see it not just with humans, but we can see it with animals, plants, everything around us changes, and then something new is born. So they say, how can it be something bad if it is natural, right? If it is part of the cycles that we go through. And that's where we can practice ourselves, right? Michel de Montaigne wrote a famous essay. He said, to philosophize is to learn how to die. And that's our greatest test, right? That's the moment where we can see if we've put everything to practice and if we can die peacefully and let go, right? That's part of what we're doing as well. We had someone on the Stoic spaces that we held on Twitter, on X, and we had this lady, she came up, she was a great mind as well. And she said, we go through mini deaths every day, right? Every moment that is lost is kind of a mini death that we have to deal with, right? So it's kind of strange that we are struggling with it so much, because we have so many experiences with it. And every time we have to let go of an attachment, we are, experiencing that as well. So again, that's where we talk about this concept of being grateful in the moment of what we have right now, and giving our attention to that, right? A French philosopher, Simone Weil, she wrote at one point, she said, attention is love, right? I can give you my time, but if I don't add attention to it, then it's more of an insult, right? But if I give you my full attention, then I can share, that love with the people around me, because I acknowledge that they exist, and I'm here for them, I'm listening to them, and I'm hearing them. And that's one of those things where we can shape that, where we can have that reminder of, yes, we are going to die at one point, but I'm here right now. And I have this moment. Let me give it my full attention. Let me give it my full love. So when that moment comes, I can look back at my entire life and say, it was beautiful, it was great. And now I can let go, because something new will be reborn from it. And I've lived my life the way I should have lived it.
Beautiful summary towards the end of the show. If you could leave the world with one Stoic lesson to heal division and bring people together, what would it be?
It would be the reminder that we're all in the same boat, right? And again, this idea of cosmopolitanism that the Stoics really adhere to is like, we're from different countries, but we are all here in the same world. We're all dealing with the same struggles, albeit different in details, we're all dealing with the same thing, and we jump to judgments and verdicts so quickly on other people, why they're doing something, maybe they're doing something wrong. But let's pause on that. Let's just take a little pause and let's reflect a little bit and give people the benefit of the doubt, right? But then again, also when we see some people in danger, or when we feel the need to step up for justice, right, because we know that it's the right thing to do, we need to show the courage to do so. So there is that kind of dichotomy that even if we don't help, then we might just be a culprit of the thing that's happening. So we have to love the people, but we also have to acknowledge the fact that not everybody is going to do the good thing. So we need to be there to either show them, to educate them, or to make sure that we prevent them from having that happen. And that's one of the things that, it's kind of like, as a coach, it's kind of the struggle where you are, because you want to help people live the right life, but it starts with doing it yourself, right? And one of the things that I would say, like, if people were to, live like 10% better, try to, the best to be the best selves, if everybody did that, then the world would already look like a different place. So instead of, telling people how to live it yourself, and then show it, emulate it, set the right example, and then people will follow, right? People will flock towards it. And if you do that, I think we can have that chain reaction of changing people's outlook to life and how they really approach it.
The Stoic idea of cosmopolitanism, oh Jesus, for global interconnected world, urge seeing all humans and family. So let me ask my family member, my sister in a woman on IT, Jamil, to take over with some questions to follow.
Thank you, B. Thank you, Beata, for your introduction. Hello, Benny. I hope you're enjoying the conversation.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. And looking forward to hearing your questions, Jamil.
So, before we go to our standard questions, I just have a question. It seems like Stoicism is about dealing with challenges. Does it also have anything to say about enjoying the good times in life? How
It's all
does it
about
help
joy.
us? Mhm.
No, definitely.
How,
It's all about joy. When we talk about the emotions, right? We talked about that a little bit at the beginning about repressing your emotions. We have the passions, right? The pathos that might be seen as the more negative ones, where we have, anger, the grief, sadness, even pleasure, right? They also say pleasure is also that ever moving goalpost, and anger is one of the worst. One of the Seneca calls it momentary madness, right? Insanity, and where we have to kind of face ourselves. But the goal is joy, right? To really enjoy and to have that deep joy and sense of gratitude for everything around us. So that's where it becomes this more positive philosophy than people think it is, which is for me, it's the wonderful. I've learned to enjoy life far more since I've started on this path, because I've reduced my anxieties, my angers, my frustrations, because I take life for what it is. That's a great question to ask, and something that's really important to highlight as well. It is all about living a joyous life and not chasing the pleasures, and also not falling into the traps of those deep emotions and sticking with them.
Thinking about how it can help us navigate challenges, what advice would you give to someone who are looking to boost their or even start their own entrepreneurial adventures?
Yeah, that's where Stoicism really comes into play, as I'm doing it myself, right, with Via Stoica, with the company that we're building. And we chase and everyone who starts something new, there's also the ideas like, that, for example, the imposter syndrome. Can I really do this, right? Or the challenges that you face, like, oh, if this is not going to work. But again, if we start from the foundation where we're coming from, and if we have that passion, that drive to say, this is something that I need to do, then those challenges can be changed into growth, right? Those challenges can be changed into something that you just need to learn. And one of the things that I've learned from my journey is that if there is something that I need to study or figure out, then I can do that, right? I have it in my power. We often think about something in the future that might be an obstacle. Well, if we focus on what we need to do right now, if we focus on our task in the present, then we can see that we already have all the tools that we need to figure out how to do it, or even to manage it, or to get support, right? We shouldn't shy away from building that support network around us and making sure that we go and ask them, the people who are experts in the things that we're lacking. So then we can really combine it all to make that journey and to make those obstacles, to turn them away. Marcus already said the obstacle becomes the way, right? It's something that I'm struggling with. Let me just go there. Let me just face it. Let me just learn how I can do it instead of trying to avoid it, because then it just gets bigger in your head. So that's the one thing that I always think about myself, even when I'm, for example, struggling to fall asleep because I'm thinking about something in my head, about the job and about whatever needs to come up, even if it's 3 a.m. Ask myself, what can I do about it right now? If nothing, then I remind myself, now is my duty to sleep. If something, then you just write the email and send it out, because otherwise you just keep struggling with it in your sleep.
Fantastic. What are the top 3 soft skills all career-driven females and males, in your opinion, should have?
Yeah, I think, again, one of the things is the confidence, right? Building from that foundation of who you are, where you're coming from, and building from that point of view, because that will help you to deal with any kind of change, adversity, or whatever to go through. Combined with adaptability, making sure that life has changed. We have in the song by John Lennon, he says, life is what happens while we're busy while we're busy planning the rest of it around us. So we need to make sure that we're adaptable. We need to make sure that we go with what the moment requires of us, and then we need to have that. We need to use the logic and reason that we have, right? That's one of the key points of Stoicism as well. Make sure that instead of working from our emotions, let's use our logic and reason to assess the situation and make sure we take the right action.
What's your go-to strategy when you're faced with a problem you need to solve?
That's a good one. First, again, it's finding out the truth of the problem, right? Is it really a problem, or where is it coming from? Is it something that I can change? Is it something that I can control? And then if you feel some kind of frustration or some kind of emotion about it, let's see what's really causing that strife. Because if you have those emotional filters, then we can't really look at the problem itself and what it is, right? And how we work towards a solution. I think that's one of the best ways of looking at a problem, is to find a solution and to work more from that. There's no problem big enough that we can't overcome with help, maybe not just by ourselves. So first of all, it is finding out what is at the core of the problem, where is the root cause, that first principle, and then seeing what we can do about that, and then making sure that we have the right workaround. And again, as I talked about, the soft skills, where we can use that reason and logic to make sure that we address it in the right way, and not go about it, or make sure that we put, sometimes people want to kind of shy away from the problem and they put it somewhere else. But no, let's face it head on. Let's go for it. And that's the best way to solve it.
Are you working on any new exciting projects right now?
We are working on some exciting workshops. I'm actually going to be teaching the Stoic Week, co-teaching the Stoic Week in the Netherlands at the moment. So I'm busy preparing myself for that, which is at the end of the month. We are writing some books. I'm also looking forward to continuing those a little bit more. Some Stoic guides that we're thinking about, and obviously building the podcast out to something more. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting projects in the pipeline, but more just to share that knowledge in a more accessible way, besides the coaching that we offer.
What is the number one book you can sit and think, oh, I wish I read before I started my career?
There's many, but the first one that comes to mind for me is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And that's because it has so many layered aspects to it. First of all, it's the personal journal of an emperor, right, in the Roman Empire, who the most wealthiest and influential person at the time. And you can see in the text, in the lines, you can see his vulnerability, right? His questioning about how to deal with this anger, how to deal with this. You can feel it in there. And then it's also, the other layer is the historical aspect. You can go into the mind of this person, as was mentioned before by Beate, who's in the struggles of the Antonine Plague, in the Germanic wars, right there at the battlefront. And he was dealing with all these things, and he was writing his journal, never meant for publication, by the way, but it was used later on. Someone took it, or however it happened, but I'm glad that it's here. And then the third part is that it's got some excellent Stoic foundational texts, right? We don't have any text surviving, right? So most of it is gone. We have Epictetus, Seneca, and then we have this of the Stoic philosopher, right? The closest resemblance to the philosopher king that Plato had envisioned. And we can read his mind and how he was trying to apply Stoicism to his life.
Let's imagine that you could meet anyone in the world for a private breakfast. Who would it be, and where would you choose to meet?
For me, that would be Epictetus. One of this was actually a slave turned into a philosopher, and was the inspiration or the kind of literature mentor of Marcus Aurelius. They never met, but he was, for me, the kind of the verbal slap in the face. His writing, it was documented by one of his students. You have the discourses and the handbook, the Enchiridion. But he's really direct, right? He tells it's the way it is. If you're doing something, he's like, he calls people a fool. Why are you such a fool if you think that this is going to make you happy? So for me, that was the verbal slap in the face. And I would love to go back to like his school in Nicopolis, which is now in Greece, and just sit there, see how he lived, and then have a good conversation with him. And he's probably going to, call me a fool plenty of times, because I'm still, as we all on this journey of making improvement. And I'm sure that he would have enough to remark on my things. But it would be lovely to listen to him and see what he would have to say.
And for the last question, can you please give us your favorite life lesson quote?
Yes, and I would have to go to Epictetus again in his handbook number 8. That's one of my favorite quotes, and it really backs a lot of the things that we've discussed in this conversation as well. He said, don't wish for your life to happen as you want it to happen, but wish for it to happen as it does happen, and your life will go smoothly, right? It's that pure acceptance of saying, okay, faith has this life figured out. The Stoics are deterministic. They say, this is going to happen. Let me accept it. Let me just, accept it gracefully with love, and then make sure that whatever my requirements are, I'm going to be there and show up in the best version that I can. And for me, that's one of those things that I really remind myself of every day. Like, I have my wants and my desires, but they will cause me a lot of anxiety if they don't happen, right? So if I accept the moment as it is, then my life will go smoothly. And it has gone smoother. Let me say smoother, not completely smooth yet.
Thank you so much, Benny. You're such a wonderful. Let us welcome back Beata to wrap things up.
Thank you so much, Jamil, and thank you once again, Benny. Epictetus said, we suffer not from events, but from our judgment about them. My judgment, Benny, is I love Stoicism for its love, progress over perfection, and empathy aspects, and would like to thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. And that's it from episode 180 of PhD Livestream. Thanks to our guest, Benny Voncken. To stay updated and ensure you never miss a positivity hack delivered, follow Women on IT and turn on notifications to be alerted once a video has been released. Life is very short and anxious for those who forget the past, neglect the present, and fear the future, as Seneca said. As always, our positivity quote comes from Positive Thinking Only and goes, look for something positive in each day, even if some days you have to look a little harder. Maya Angelou philosophy and teachings share some similarities with Stoicism. For instance, she advised against complaining about things beyond one's control, which is a core principle of Stoicism. So let me just remind you, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. Today is your day to hug the future, hug the positivity you want, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.